February 14, 1944. At 18,000 feet above occupied China, Lieutenant Takeshi Yamamoto's Zero was burning. Engine dead. Below, 60 miles of hostile territory. No friendly airfields. No rescue teams. He thought about his wife Yuki. Their daughter Akira, barely 2 years old. In Japanese culture, surrender meant dishonor that would follow his family forever. But Takeshi couldn't die. Not today. And what happened next would be kept secret for 60 years. Like this if you're ready for a story that will keep you watching until the very last second. Subscribe now. The Zero descended through clouds. Altimeter unwound. 15,000 feet. 13,000 feet. At 8,000 feet, Takeshi trimmed the controls. The engine coughed twice, then quit. Silence. He yanked the canopy release. Nothing. Hydraulics dead. He braced his boots against the panel and pushed with all his strength. The canopy cracked open. He unbuckled and felt the slipstream rip at him. He ejected into 6,000 feet of air. His parachute deployed. Above him, the Zero slammed into the mountainside in an orange explosion visible for miles. Then the gunfire started. Below, soldiers were shooting at him in his parachute. His stomach clenched. This was it. The bullets snapped past. One so close he felt the heat. Then it stopped. A figure emerged from the forest. A Chinese officer in a nationalist uniform, rifle held horizontally, barking orders. The shooting ceased. Takeshi landed hard in a snowbank 30 seconds later. The officer was first to reach him. A man in his 40s with a scarred face. He looked at Takeshi, still entangled in his parachute, bleeding, terrified. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the officer did something unexpected. He helped cut Takeshi free from the parachute. Carefully, supporting his weight, a young soldier offered Takeshi a canteen. The water was cold and clean and tasted like life. Takeshi drank deeply, his hands shaking. He'd prepared for torture, execution, anything. He was unprepared for basic human kindness from men who had every reason to want him dead. As soldiers led him down the mountain, Takeshi kept waiting for violence. It never came. 2 hours through snow and rocky terrain. His shoulder throbbed. His feet were numb. But nobody hit him. Nobody spat on him. When they reached the base, Takeshi saw Chinese soldiers everywhere. Armed men who'd lost friends to the Japanese military. They stared at him as he was led through. Some with anger. Some with curiosity. None with violence. An officer emerged, younger, maybe 35, with significant rank. He studied Takeshi. Then did something that would echo through Takeshi's life for 60 years. He saluted him. A military salute. The universal gesture of respect between warriors. Takeshi instinctively returned it. The message was clear. You fought well, you will be treated as a soldier, not a criminal. That night, a doctor examined his wounds. Professional. Clinical. Later, Takeshi sat in a cell, a storage room with a cot and blanket. Not torture. Not comfortable. But clean. Humane. Takeshi realized something fundamental. These soldiers weren't letting personal hatred override their professional code. They were treating him as a prisoner of war under military honor. That night he wept quietly, not from pain, but from the collision of propaganda with reality. Everything they'd told him about Chinese soldiers was lies. Over 2 weeks, Takeshi moved between military positions. At one location, a senior officer who spoke fluent Japanese sat across from him. "What is your name?" the officer asked. "Takeshi Yamamoto, Lieutenant, Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service." The officer introduced himself as Major Chun. "You are far from home, Lieutenant. Your family does not know if you live or die." Takeshi nodded. "The International Red Cross will be notified. They will inform your family through neutral channels. You will be alive." Then Major Chun did something shocking. He slid a photograph across the table. His own family, wife, 3 children, in a garden. "My home was destroyed by your people," Major Chun said evenly, not with anger, just fact. "My sister was killed. 2 nephews. But I will not execute you for that. Because I am an officer. I have responsibilities. I have rules. The rules are not my personal revenge. They are something larger. He tapped the photograph. One day this war ends. What kind of world do I want to build? One where soldiers murder prisoners. Or one where we treat each other according to code. I choose the code. Takeshi listened. Major Chun wasn't being kind. He was being professional. There was a crucial difference. You will receive adequate food, medical care, the ability to write home through the Red Cross. You will not be tortured. This is the Geneva Convention. Do you understand? Takeshi did. And that understanding shifted something fundamental within him. The food was sparse but consistent: rice, vegetables, occasionally meat. Not luxurious, but better than expected. No gratuitous cruelty. Guards didn't taunt him. One of the other pilots, a navigator named Kenji, had been captured 3 months earlier. They are not going to kill you, Kenji said. I have been here 12 weeks. These are professional soldiers. They hate us, maybe, but they are not barbarians. Over the following days, Takeshi experienced a restoration of humanity. For 5 years, he'd been a weapon trained to see enemies as abstractions. Propaganda had reduced Chinese soldiers to vermin. But now, living among them, eating their food, treated with dignity despite being their enemy, he couldn't maintain that dehumanization. One guard named Lu, probably in his 50s with a limp from an old injury, developed almost a friendship with Takeshi. Lu had learned a few Japanese words. Takeshi had learned Mandarin. Simple conversations about families, about missing home, about war. After war, maybe you go home, see your family, Lu said in broken Japanese, pointing at Takeshi's wedding ring. Maybe, Takeshi replied. If I live. You live, Lu said with certainty. Major Chun does not execute prisoners. This is known. He is officer of honor. What struck Takeshi was that this honor came not from softness, but from strength. These soldiers had every reason to kill him. Japanese forces had killed millions of Chinese civilians. The brutality had been apocalyptic. But Major Chun had chosen a code that transcended personal vengeance. By the end of 2 months in custody, Takeshi had transformed. The propaganda had crumbled. Not because he'd been treated kindly. Kindness wasn't the variable. He'd been treated professionally. By men strong enough to follow rules even when they could break them without consequence. That was the revelation that changed everything. In August 1945, war ended. Takeshi returned to Japan in November, expecting ruins and death. He found ruins, Tokyo ashes, Yokohama a tomb. But his wife Yuki and daughter Akira were alive. When he walked through the door, Yuki didn't recognize him. He'd left a uniformed officer. He returned thin, hollow-eyed, aged by captivity. You are alive, she said, holding Akira close. I am alive, he told her. And everything they told us about the enemy, all of it was lies. Takeshi found work as a translator during occupation. Through this work, he became aware of a larger pattern. Across Japan, thousands of prisoners were coming home with similar stories. The propaganda had created expectations of brutality. The reality was professional military conduct. Takeshi became known as someone who'd lived in captivity and survived. People sought him out. Were the stories true? Were Americans really barbarians? His answer was always the same. The Americans are people, like us. Some cruel, maybe, but also many who believe that even in war, there are lines you do not cross. In 1950, Takeshi helped facilitate a cultural exchange program. Japanese students to America, American students to Japan, building peace between former enemies. When asked to write about his experience for a newspaper, he focused on one theme: the power of treating enemies with dignity. Major Chun did not spare my life out of weakness. He was strong enough to follow a code that transcended personal hatred. That strength creates peace. The article was published in 1952. Later, when historians documented Japanese prisoner experiences, Takeshi's words resurfaced. His testimony became part of the historical record of how professional conduct between bitter enemies could build lasting peace. In 1987, at 75 years old, Takeshi spoke at the Japanese Self-Defense Forces Academy. He told officers and cadets about being shot down, expecting execution, being treated with dignity by captors. You will face enemies in your careers. The question is, will you dehumanize them? Or remember they are human beings worthy of basic respect? He paused. When I was shot down, I expected death. Instead, I found soldiers strong enough to treat me with dignity even though I was their enemy. That changed how I understood war, peace, what it means to be human. If you carry that understanding, that strength includes treating enemies with dignity, you will be far better soldiers. The speech was recorded. It became part of self-defense forces training. Young officers heard Takeshi's voice, telling them about mercy on a mountainside in 1944. Takeshi's daughter Akira became a teacher focused on intercultural understanding. His granddaughter became a diplomat working on Japanese-Chinese relations. When Takeshi died in 1999, his obituary noted, Takeshi Yamamoto believed that professional military conduct, even between enemies, was the foundation of lasting peace. That belief shaped his life and influenced generations. Japan's post-war reconciliation with the US and China was built on these experiences. When soldiers came home talking about fair treatment, it made Japan willing to accept American aid for rebuilding. When that aid came without revenge or subjugation, it transformed the relationship. Japan went from implacable enemy in 1945 to close ally by 1955. That transformation wasn't inevitable. It depended on choices at every level, from Major Chin following Geneva Convention to soldiers like Liu treating prisoners with humanity. Approximately 36,000 Japanese soldiers were captured by Chinese forces. The vast majority survived. By contrast, Japanese treatment of prisoners had been catastrophic, survival rate around 27%. Yet despite this history, despite having every reason for revenge, Chinese and Japanese soldiers chose differently. That choice, repeated thousands of times, created the foundation for reconciliation. In 2000, a filmmaker found General Chun, now 92, living in Beijing. Chun asked about his decision to follow Geneva Convention standards instead of seeking revenge. Chen's response was simple: I am a soldier. Soldiers have codes. If I abandon them when convenient, what am I? A soldier or simply a person seeking revenge? I chose to be a soldier. That meant following rules, even when the other side did not. Takeshi spent his last years writing a book published in 2001, Mercy on the Mountain: How Professional Soldiers Built Peace. He concluded, I believed Chinese soldiers were subhuman. I believed surrender meant dishonor. Major Chun taught me none of this was true. Through his professional conduct, he showed that human beings, even enemies, could choose dignity over vengeance. That lesson is what I'm most proud to pass to my children and grandchildren. His book is assigned reading in Japanese military academies. His story reminds us that even in war, there are choices. Even with power over a helpless enemy, there are lines you can respect. The way you treat enemies when you have power over them determines what kind of world you build after conflict ends. Mercy is not weakness. Professional conduct is not appeasement. Seeing enemies as human beings worthy of dignity is the most strategic choice you can make. Because that choice creates the foundation for everything after: reconciliation, rebuilding, transformation of enemies into allies. Takeshi was shot down as an enemy. He could have been executed. Instead, he was treated with dignity. That moment, repeated thousands of times, changed history. It made peace possible. It made reconciliation inevitable. That is the power of choosing humanity in the midst of war. That is the legacy of Major Chin. That is why this story matters, not just as history, but as a guide for how we conduct ourselves in times of conflict.